The boy came out of the dust like a ghost. Not walking, staggering. His feet dragged through the dry earth outside the ranch gate, kicking up little clouds that hung in the heat. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and his face was streaked with something darker than dirt. Ethan Cole saw him from the porch. He'd been sitting there since dawn, coffee gone cold in his hand, watching the valley the way he always did, like a man expecting something he didn't want to name. The boy appeared at the edge of the property where the fence line met the road, small and hunched, moving like he'd been walking for days. Ethan set the cup down slow. The boy collapsed at the gate. Ethan was off the porch before he thought about it, boots hitting the ground hard, crossing the yard in long strides. The boy was maybe 10, maybe 12, hard to tell with the dust caked on him. His hands were blistered, his lips cracked white. When Ethan knelt beside him, the boy's eyes rolled up, glassy and unfocused. "Hey," Ethan said, voice low. "Hey son, you hear me?" The boy's mouth moved. No sound came out at first, just a dry rasp like wind through dead grass. Then his hand shot out, fingers closing around Ethan's wrist with surprising strength. "Please," the boy croaked, "please save my sister." Ethan went still. The boy's eyes locked onto his, and there was something in them that made Ethan's chest tighten, not just fear, but a kind of desperation that went deeper than panic. The kind that came from watching something terrible happen and being too small to stop it. "Where is she?" Ethan asked. The boy's grip tightened. "They took her, his voice broke. "They're gonna kill her, they said by sundown." Ethan looked past the boy, out toward the road. Empty, nothing but heat shimmer and the low hum of cicadas. He looked back down at the kid, at the way his chest heaved like he'd been running forever. "Who took her?" The boy's face twisted. "The Barlow brothers, he coughed, and it rattled in his lungs. "They said our daddy owed them, said if he didn't pay, they'd take something worth more." Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew the Barlows, everyone in the territory knew them. Dutch Barlow ran a crew out of the canyon lands north of town, rustlers, claim jumpers, men who worked the edges of the law like it was a suggestion. They weren't killers by reputation, but they weren't saints either. And if they'd taken a girl as collateral, it meant they were desperate or stupid. Maybe both. "Where's your father?" Ethan asked. The boy shook his head, and tears cut clean lines through the dirt on his cheeks. "Dead. They shot him yesterday. Me and Lily ran, but they caught her at the creek. I hid in the rocks till they left. Then his voice cracked again. "I ran all night. I didn't know where else to go." Ethan exhaled slow through his nose. He didn't know this boy, didn't know his sister, didn't owe them anything. But the kid was looking at him like he was the last man standing between his sister and a bullet, and Ethan had been looked at that way before. Long time ago. He stood, pulling the boy up with him. The kid swayed on his feet, and Ethan caught him by the shoulder, steadying him. "Come on," Ethan said, "get inside." He half-carried the boy into the house, setting him down at the kitchen table. The boy slumped forward, arms folded on the wood, head resting on them like he might fall asleep right there. Ethan poured water from the pitcher, set the cup in front of him. "Drink slow." The boy obeyed, hands shaking as he lifted the cup. Ethan watched him for a moment, then turned and walked to the back room. He came back with a rifle, a Winchester, oiled and clean, and a box of shells. He set them on the table and started loading. The boy's eyes went wide. "You're going after her?" Ethan didn't look up. "How many men?" The boy blinked, like he hadn't expected the question. "4, maybe 5. I saw Dutch and his brother and a couple others." "You know where they're keeping her?" "The old mill, by the North Fork." Ethan nodded. He knew it. Abandoned lumber mill, half-rotted and leaning into the hillside. Good place to hole up if you didn't want to be found. Also a good place to get cornered if you weren't careful. He slid the last shell into the rifle, worked the lever once to check the action, then looked at the boy. "What's your name?" "Ben." "Ben, I'm going to get your sister, but I need you to stay here, you understand?" The boy's face crumpled. "I can help." You can help by staying alive, Ethan said, and his voice was firm but not unkind. If I don't come back, you wait till morning, then you ride into town and find the marshal. Tell him everything. You hear me? Ben stared at him, eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Then he nodded, just barely. Ethan slung the rifle over his shoulder and walked to the door. He paused there, one hand on the frame, looking back at the boy sitting small and alone at the table. "What's her name, Et?" Han asked. "Your sister." "Lily," Ben whispered. Ethan nodded once. Then he stepped out into the heat, and the door closed quiet behind him. The valley stretched out before him, wide and silent under the high sun. Somewhere out there, a girl was waiting for something, rescue or a bullet. And Ethan Cole, who hadn't loaded a gun with intent in 3 years, walked toward his horse with the weight of it settling back into his bones like an old scar. The ride north took an hour. Ethan kept the horse at a steady pace, not pushing, not wasting energy. The land rolled in long, dry waves, dotted with juniper and sage, the sun pressing down like a hand on his back. He didn't think about what he was riding toward, didn't let himself. Thinking led to hesitation. He'd learned that a long time ago. The mill came into view just past noon, a dark silhouette against the pale hills. It sat near the fork where 2 dry creeks met, the old wheel half collapsed into the streambed, the building itself sagging like a drunk leaning on a bar. Smoke curled from somewhere inside, thin and lazy, the kind that came from a small fire meant to cook, not signal. Ethan pulled up a quarter-mile out, dismounting in the shade of a rock outcrop. He tied the horse, checked the rifle again, then started forward on foot. The ground was hard-packed and quiet. He moved slow, keeping low, using the scrub and the terrain to stay out of sight. When he got close enough to hear voices, he stopped. 2 men stood outside the mill, leaning against the wall near the entrance. One was tall and lean, the other shorter, thicker through the shoulders. Both had rifles slung loose across their backs. They were talking low, passing a cigarette between them. Ethan watched from behind a tangle of brush, counting breaths. Inside, he could hear more voices, laughter, the scrape of something heavy being moved. He couldn't see the girl, but if Ben was right, she was in there. He had 2 choices. Walk in and talk, or walk in shooting. The first one might get them all killed. The second one might get the girl killed. Ethan closed his eyes for just a second, and in that darkness, he saw another face, another girl, another time. A time when he'd made the wrong choice and lived with it every day since. He opened his eyes. Then he stood up and walked into the open. The 2 men saw him immediately. The tall one straightened, hand going to his rifle. The shorter one dropped the cigarette and stepped forward, squinting. "The hell are you?" the tall one said. Ethan stopped 20 feet out, rifle held low but ready. "I'm here for the girl." The men exchanged a glance. The tall one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You lost, mister." "No." "Then you're stupid." Ethan didn't answer. He just stood there, weight balanced, watching them both. The shorter man shifted, and Ethan's eyes flicked to him, just for a heartbeat, enough to let him know he'd been seen. "There's 5 of us," the tall man said. "You really think you're walking out of here with her?" "I think you're going to let me." The tall man laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "And why the hell would we do that?" "Because I'm giving you the chance to." The laughter stopped. The door to the mill creaked open, and a third man stepped out. He was older than the other 2, with a graying beard and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He looked at Ethan with the kind of flat, measuring stare that came from years of deciding whether a man was worth the bullet. "Who's this?" the older man, Dutch Barlow, Ethan guessed, asked. "Says he's here for the girl," the tall one said. Dutch tilted his head. "That right?" Ethan met his eyes. "That's right." "You family?" "No." "Lawman?" "No." "Then you're just some fool who doesn't know when to mind his business." Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle just slightly. "The boy made it my business." Dutch's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, something cold and calculating. Boy's got a mouth, probably told you we're monsters, told you we killed his daddy in cold blood. Did you? His daddy drew first. Dutch spat to the side, owed us $300, tried to shoot his way out of it, that's on him. And the girl? Insurance, Dutch said simply. We let her go when we get what we are owed. You won't get it from a dead man. Dutch smiled, slow and thin. No, but we'll get it from whoever buys her. The words hung in the air like a noose. Ethan felt something go very cold inside him. You're not selling that girl. Why not? Dutch shrugged. Plenty of men pay good money for a young thing who can cook and clean, maybe more if they're the type. The shorter man chuckled. Ethan's voice dropped, quiet and flat. Let her go. Dutch looked at him for a long moment, then he smiled again. No. Ethan didn't move. Then we've got a problem. We do, Dutch agreed, but it's your problem, not mine. He turned and started back toward the door, the two men outside. Straightened, hands drifting toward their rifles. Walk away, Dutch called over his shoulder, while you still can. Ethan stood there, alone in the open, the sun burning down on him. He thought about Ben, sitting in his kitchen, waiting. He thought about Lily, somewhere inside that mill, scared and small and hoping someone would come. He thought about the girl he hadn't saved. Then he said, loud and clear, I'm not leaving without her. Dutch stopped. He turned slow and looked at Ethan like he was something curious and unfortunate. Then you're gonna die here. Ethan leveled the rifle. Maybe, he said, but so are you. The wind picked up, stirring the dust between them. The silence stretched. No one moved. The two men outside had their hands on their rifles now, fingers resting on the wood, waiting for the word. Dutch stood in the doorway, half-shadowed, his face unreadable. Ethan's heartbeat was steady, too steady, the kind of calm that came when the decision was already made and all that was left was the follow-through. Dutch broke the silence first. You know what you're doing? He asked, and there was something almost conversational in his tone. You know what happens when you point a gun at me. I imagine you'll try to kill me, Ethan said. That's right, Dutch nodded, like they were agreeing on the weather. And then what? Say you get lucky. Say you drop me, drop these two. You know there's 3 more inside, right? You know one of them's got a knife to that girl's throat right now, just in case someone like you showed up. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't lower the rifle. Dutch stepped forward just one step, hands loose at his sides. So here's how this plays out. You shoot, she dies. You don't shoot, you die. Either way, you lose, he paused, unless you walk away. Not happening. Dutch sighed like he was genuinely disappointed. Then you're a fool. He nodded. The tall man moved first, hand darting for his rifle. Ethan swung the Winchester and fired, one clean crack that split the air. The tall man jerked back, rifle clattering to the ground, and hit the wall hard before sliding down. The shorter man was faster. He had his rifle up and was squeezing the trigger when Ethan dropped to one knee and fired again. The shot took him high in the chest, spinning him sideways. He fell without a sound. Dutch was already moving, ducking back through the door. Ethan ran. He crossed the open ground in seconds, rifle up, and hit the wall beside the entrance. Inside, he could hear shouting, boots on wood, the metallic sound of guns being cocked. He took a breath, then swung around the doorframe and went in low. The interior was dim, thick with dust, and the smell of old wood. Sunlight came through gaps in the walls, slicing the space into bars of light and shadow. 3 men were inside, one near the back wall, one by a table in the center, and one standing over a small figure huddled on the floor. Lily. She was maybe 13, thin and pale, her dress torn at the hem. Her hands were tied in front of her, and there was a bruise darkening her cheek. The man standing over her had a revolver in his hand, pointed down at her head. Drop it, the man shouted, voice high and tight. Drop it or I'll. Ethan shot him. The man staggered, the revolver falling from his hand, and collapsed sideways into the dirt. The man by the table fired wild, the shot splintering wood above Ethan's head. Ethan fired back, worked the lever, fired again. The man went down. Dutch appeared from behind a support beam, revolver raised. He fired twice, one shot hitting the doorframe, the other cutting through the air so close Ethan felt the heat of it. Ethan dove behind an overturned cart, rolled, came up firing. Dutch cursed and ducked back. The last man, young, maybe 20, with wild eyes, charged from the side, knife in hand. Ethan twisted, brought the rifle up, but the man was too close. The knife slashed down, and Ethan caught his wrist, the blade stopping inches from his throat. They grappled, crashing into the table. The man was strong, desperate, pushing the knife down with both hands. Ethan gritted his teeth, muscles straining, and then drove his knee up hard into the man's gut. The man gasped, grip loosening, and Ethan shoved him back, grabbed the rifle, and swung the stock like a club. It connected with a sickening crack, and the man dropped. Ethan spun, breathing hard, looking for Dutch. The mill was silent. Dust hung in the air, drifting through the light. Ethan moved slow, rifle up, checking corners, checking shadows. He could hear his own heartbeat, the creak of the building settling, nothing else. Then he saw the back door, hanging open. Dutch was gone. Ethan started toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at Lily, still huddled on the floor, eyes wide and terrified. She was shaking, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at him like she didn't know if he was another danger or something else. Ethan lowered the rifle. "Flee!" He crossed to her slow and knelt down. "You're Lily." She nodded, just barely. "I'm a friend of your brother's," Ethan said, keeping his voice low and steady. "He asked me to come get you. You're safe now." Her lip trembled. "Ben. He's at my place, waiting for you." The tears came then, sudden and hard, and she covered her face with her bound hands. Ethan reached out and gently untied the rope, his fingers careful. When her hands were free, she wiped at her eyes, smearing dirt and tears together. "Can you walk?" Ethan asked. She nodded again. Ethan stood and helped her up. She swayed and he steadied her. "Stay close to me, we're leaving." They started toward the front door, moving through the wreckage of the mill. Ethan kept the rifle ready, eyes scanning, but the building was empty now, except for the dead and the dying. Outside, the sun was bright and harsh. Ethan squinted against it, leading Lily toward the rocks where he'd left the horse. She walked beside him, silent, one hand gripping the back of his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. Behind them, the mill stood dark and still. And somewhere out in the hills, Dutch Barlow was running. The ride back was slow. Lily sat in front of Ethan on the saddle, small and quiet, her head resting against his chest. She hadn't spoken since they left the mill. Ethan didn't push. He just kept the horse moving at an easy pace, one arm loose around her to keep her steady. The sun had started its descent, stretching shadows long across the valley. The heat was fading, replaced by the first cool breath of evening. Ethan kept his eyes on the horizon, scanning for movement, for riders, for any sign that Dutch had doubled back. Nothing. Just the empty land and the quiet. After a while, Lily stirred. "Is Ben really okay?" Her voice was small, hoarse from crying or screaming or both. "He's okay," Ethan said. "Wore out but okay. He ran a long way to find help." "He's brave," she whispered. "He is." She was quiet for another stretch, and then she said, "Our daddy used to say Ben was too small to be brave, but he was wrong." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know what to say to that. Lily shifted slightly, turning her head to look up at him. Her face was still streaked with dirt, and the bruise on her cheek had darkened to a deep purple. "Why'd you come?" "Your brother asked me to." "But you don't know us." "No." "Then why?" Ethan looked down at her, at those wide, questioning eyes, and he saw himself reflected back years ago, a different version, standing in front of a different girl who'd asked him a different question. Because someone should have come for her, he said quietly. Lily blinked. Who? Ethan turned his eyes back to the road. Doesn't matter now. They rode in silence after that, the only sound the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. When they reached the ranch, Ben was on the porch. He'd been sitting there, Ethan guessed, since the moment he'd ridden out. The boy stood as they approached, hands gripping the porch rail, his face tight with fear and hope tangled together. Ethan reined in the horse and dismounted, then reached up to help Lily down. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Ethan steadied her. Ben was off the porch in a heartbeat, running, and then he crashed into his sister, arms wrapping around her so tight it looked like he'd never let go. Lily clung to him, and the tears came again, but different this time, softer, quieter, the kind that came from relief instead of fear. Ethan stepped back, giving them space. He led the horse toward the barn, moving slow, giving them time. When he came back, they were sitting on the porch steps, side by side. Ben had his arm around Lily, and she was leaning into him, eyes closed. They looked small and fragile and impossibly strong all at once. Ethan climbed the steps and sat down on the top one, a few feet away. He pulled his hat off and set it beside him, running a hand through his hair. "You too hungry?" he asked. Ben nodded. "Yes, sir." Ethan stood and went inside. He moved through the kitchen, pulling out bread and cold meat, cheese, and a jar of preserves. He put it all on a plate and brought it out to the porch, setting it between them. "Eat," he said, "both of you." They ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Maybe they hadn't. Ethan watched them for a moment, then went back inside and brought out a blanket. He draped it over Lily's shoulders without a word. She looked up at him, eyes red and exhausted. "Thank you." Ethan nodded. "You're welcome." Ben looked at him, and there was something raw in his expression, gratitude and guilt, and something else Ethan couldn't quite name. "I didn't think you'd come back. I told you I would. But you didn't have to. You didn't owe us anything." Ethan sat back down, leaning against the post. "No, I didn't." "Then why?" It was the second time someone had asked him that today. Ethan looked out at the valley, at the land he'd built a life on trying to forget another one. "Long time ago," he said slowly, "I didn't help someone I should have, told myself it wasn't my fight, that I didn't owe them anything." He paused. "She died because of it." The words sat heavy in the air. Lily pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Ethan looked at her, then at Ben. "But you two aren't her, and I'm not that man anymore." Ben wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. "What happens now?" Ethan considered the question. "You have any kin, anywhere you can go?" Ben shook his head. "Just us." Ethan exhaled slow. He'd figured as much. 2 kids, no parents, no money, no home. The world wasn't kind to people like that. "You can stay here," he said. "For now, long as you need." Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" "But we can't pay you," Ben said quickly. "We don't have anything." "I'm not asking you to pay." Ethan stood, picking up his hat. "You can help around the place, earn your keep that way if it makes you feel better, but you're not going back out there alone." Ben stared at him, and for a moment he looked like he might cry again, but he didn't. He just nodded, swallowing hard. Ethan stepped off the porch, then paused and looked back at them. 2 kids wrapped in a blanket, sitting on his porch like it was the only safe place left in the world. Maybe it was. "Get some rest," he said, "both of you." He walked toward the barn, the evening settling around him, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan Cole felt something close to peace. Morning came quiet. Ethan was up before the sun, standing on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the light creep over the hills. The valley was still, painted in shades of gray and gold, and for a moment everything felt balanced. Then he saw the rider. A single figure, coming slow down the road from the north. Ethan set the cup down and walked to the edge of the porch, eyes narrowing. The rider was too far to make out clearly, but something about the way he sat in the saddle, loose, confident, made Ethan's hand drift toward his hip. He wasn't wearing the gun. He went inside, grabbed the revolver from the drawer and strapped it on. When he came back out, the rider was closer. It was Dutch Barlow. He came alone, hands visible, no rifle across his back. He stopped at the gate, just like Ben had the day before, and sat there waiting. Ethan stepped off the porch and walked out to meet him. They stood on opposite sides of the fence, 20 feet of dusty ground between them. Dutch looked tired, shirt stained, face drawn, eyes shadowed, but he wasn't beaten, not yet. "You here to finish it?" Ethan asked. Dutch shook his head. "No." "Then what?" Dutch looked past him toward the house. "The kids inside." "They are. They safe." "They are." Dutch nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away. Then he looked back at Ethan. "You killed 3 of my men. They were going to kill me." "I know," Dutch shifted in the saddle. "I'm not here for revenge, if that's what you're thinking." "Then what are you here for?" Dutch was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was different, less hard, more worn. "I'm here to tell you I'm done." Ethan frowned. "Done?" "With this," Dutch gestured vaguely. "All of it. The crew, the jobs, the whole damn thing. I'm leaving the territory." "Why?" "Because I'm getting old." Dutch smiled, but it was thin and humorless. "And because yesterday I realized I was about to let a girl get sold to pay off a debt that didn't matter, and that's not who I thought I was." Ethan studied him, looking for the lie, the angle. He didn't see one. "You expect me to believe that?" Ethan said. "No," Dutch shook his head. "I don't expect you to believe anything, but it's the truth anyway." He paused. "The girl, Lily, she remind you of anyone?" Ethan's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Dutch saw it. "Thought so. We all got ghosts, mister. Some of us just take longer to see them." He pulled the reins, turning the horse. Then he stopped and looked back. "For what it's worth," Dutch said, "you did the right thing. I hope it sits easier with you than it does with me." Then he rode off, slow and steady, until he was just a shape in the distance, and then nothing at all. Ethan stood there for a long time, watching the empty road. Inside, Ben and Lily were awake, sitting at the kitchen table. Lily had washed her face, and Ben had combed his hair. They looked small in the big, quiet house, but they didn't look scared anymore. "Who was that?" Ben asked. "No one," Ethan said, "just someone passing through." Lily looked at him with those sharp, knowing eyes. Was it one of them? Ethan didn't lie to her. "Yeah." "Is he coming back?" "No." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her breakfast. Ethan poured himself another cup of coffee and sat down across from them. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came Hen people had been through something together and didn't need to fill the air with words. After a while, Ben spoke. "Mr. Cole." "Just Ethan." "Ethan," Ben corrected. "What you said last night about staying here, did you mean it?" "I meant it." "For how long?" Ethan looked at him, then at Lily. "Long as you want, or until you find somewhere better." Ben's throat worked. "I don't think there is anywhere better." Ethan didn't say anything to that. He just nodded. The days turned into weeks. Ben worked the ranch like he'd been born to it, feeding the horses, mending fence, hauling water. He was small, but he was strong, and he didn't complain. Lily helped in the house, cooking and cleaning, and slowly the bruise on her cheek faded. They didn't talk much about what had happened. Some things didn't need talking about. One evening, Ethan was out by the barn when Lily came to find him. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun, and for a moment, she looked like someone much older. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "The person you didn't help, the one you talked about, what was her name?" Ethan stopped what he was doing and set the hammer down. He looked at Lily for a long moment, and then he said, "Anna." "What happened to her?" "Men came, took her. I didn't stop them because I was scared. He picked up the hammer again, turning it over in his hands. By the time I got brave, it was too late. Lily stepped closer. Do you think about her? Every day. Do you think she'd forgive you? Ethan looked up at her, and his eyes were tired and sad, and something else, something that might have been hope. I don't know, he said, but I think maybe if I'd saved you, she might have understood. Lily smiled, small and soft. Then I think she forgives you. She turned and walked back toward the house, and Ethan stood there in the fading light, holding a hammer and feeling lighter than he had in years. Years later, people in the valley would tell the story of the rancher who saved the Callaway kids. They'd say he was a hard man, but a good one, that he took in 2 orphans and raised them like they were his own, that he never asked for thanks and never looked back. And if you asked Ben or Lily, they'd tell you something else. They'd tell you about the morning a boy came stumbling out of the dust, desperate and afraid, and a man who could have turned away, but didn't. They'd tell you about the sound of a rifle being loaded, and a voice that said, calm and certain, "Get behind me." And they'd tell you that sometimes salvation doesn't come from heaven. Sometimes it comes from a man with a gun and a conscience that won't let him look away.